All right. Hi, everybody. Tim Nutt here with Muse by Clio, and thrilled to be moderating a discussion today all about NIVA, the National Independent Venue Association, which is the recipient of the 2020-2021 Clio Music Impact Award. This award is hugely well-deserved for the remarkable work that NIVA has done, really as the leading voice for America's independent venues at a time of existential crisis for them, as so many venues have been pushed to the brink of collapse due to COVID-19. NIVA was formed in April of 2020, just 3 weeks into the pandemic in the US, and managed to get national legislation passed in just 8 months, creating a true lifeline for the industry, although there is still a lot left to do. So I'm pleased to welcome my guests today. First of all, Reverend Moose, co-founder and executive director of NIVA, also co-founder and managing partner of Marauder. Audrey Fix-Schaefer, board member and communications director at NIVA, also communications director for IMP venues, the 930 Club, Lincoln Theater, the Anthem, and Meriwether Coast Pavilion. Lenora Jules, CMO at Pabst Theater Group in Milwaukee, a NIVA member, also marketing committee chair at NIVA. And Jason Garrell, art director of Pabst Theater Group and head of design for NIVA. Thank you all for joining me so much. We'll get into everything you guys have been doing over the past year soon, but first, really, to me, the most important thing is, where are we now? We're recording this in mid-May. The Save Our Stages Act was passed in December. People are excited about seeing live music again, but I know a lot of venues are still waiting to see funds. So I'd love to hear from all of you guys sort of where things stand for NIVA members today and how that whole process is going.
Yeah, I think the where are we now can be somewhat answered by how this is happening at the moment. We're not yet able to reopen fully across the country. We're not yet able to congregate in the rooms and enjoy the live music and entertainment and comedy that we all want to be able to enjoy so much and be with each other. And I haven't even met the other panelists. So it's like, there's the ability to just see each other in person. We're not yet there. The last 14 months has seen the creation of NIVA. It's seen the launch of the Save Our Stages campaign that was originally intended as a rallying cry. It ended up being a piece of legislation and then signed into bill on December 27th. Now it's more formally known as the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. We are hoping that those funds will be distributed as soon as possible because we're still trying to put the pieces together from this last year. In many ways, we've had such an amazing, accomplished, successful year. But the one core element that we've been fighting for from the very, very first conversation, we've not yet been able to celebrate. So hopefully by the time this is being seen, that will be in hindsight, and we will be celebrating that as well. Because, really we want to be able to make these institutions whole. We want to make sure that they're there for the future generations. We want to make sure they're there for this generation. Mm-hmm. And we ultimately want to be able to enjoy the live events that bring so much meaning to our lives to begin with.
Yeah, Audrey, how do you feel about where we're at right now?
Well, it is, when you said that it took us 8 months to pass the bill to get legislation where we got $16 billion that is earmarked for independent venues across the country and also promoters and festivals, those 8 months, if you were to ask me how long did it take, I would have told you 856 years. That's what it felt like, because it was as though we were taking a cement-filled wheelbarrow that we had to push up Mount Everest. And because it's not an easy thing to do, but we were a gang of perfect strangers, all with the hope that we could save our own businesses. And then quickly, once we started to get to know each other, I guess you would say, on Zoom, we were fighting for each other. And none of us could have possibly gotten this accomplished to save our industry had we been on our own. We needed to do it together. And we are still, as was noted, the relief was promised about 5 months ago, and it has still not come to a reality to the organization's bank account. So we are still pushing. But hopefully by the time you hear this, as Moose said, it will have arrived. And I can say that Well, one thing I would note is that the champions that we were able to bring on board with us were in congressional champions, for starting with Senator Klobuchar from Minnesota and John Cornyn from Texas, and then Senator Schumer from New York, who was just an incredible champion, understanding that these venues aren't just places of business. They're small, they're owned by small business people, but that bring enormous value to their local communities. So it's not just about saving the arts, it's about saving the local economy. There was a study out of Chicago that showed for every dollar spent at a small music venue, $12 of economic activity was realized for the area community. So that made our mission bipartisan. And it was one of those rare things in 2020 that people could agree on. And so it was a hard fought 8 months. But with that came the opportunity to meet people like Lenora and Jason, who without them, I don't know that we could have done any of this, because of their marketing strengths, their ability to rally people and ideas and organize. And especially when you think that all these volunteers that came together, and we're all volunteers. We now have 3,000 members and we're in every state. We've never worked before together, so we had to learn how to do that. And everybody's used to calling their own shots. If I would underscore one word in the name of the association, the National Independent Venue Association, it would be independent, as in fiercely, as in we're all used to running our own show and making our own decisions. But we, as a group of type A strangers, got to come together, and it was with the help of Lenora and Jason as well.
Yeah, Lenora and Jason, I'd love to hear some of you from Milwaukee and what it was like to get involved in this project over the last year.
Well, I'll say I was extremely excited to get involved in the project, and I think that, speaking with you today is obviously a very different place than we were a year ago. It was very difficult to discern, what we would be able to accomplish, because something like this hasn't been done before for independent venues in the entertainment industry. And taking on, we were in a totally different realm, right? Because all of us are entertainment people. We're not politicians. And we were basically going to Congress, doing something we've never done before, working with people we had never seen or met before, and deciding that this was important to us, but also trying to, get public support for our message and our mission during a time when the public was facing so much. There was the pandemic, there was the Black Lives Matter movement. There were so many things happening in the world in general that to try to push our message to the forefront while still being sensitive of the other messages and issues that were facing the United States and the world, being sensitive to those issues for the US and globally, truly, was a challenge. And I think that we did it in a sensitive way and in a way that made our voices heard and in a way that got it across the finish line, which we didn't even know if we could do when we first started. There were only a handful of venues, so to have grown it to 3,000 venues, to have gotten millions of signatures from the public when the public was also struggling, it really meant a lot to see the impact we had in the entertainment industry, and just all the way down to an usher who's going to need a job, and if we can't come back, that usher can't get a job. So it was important from the top down, and it felt really great to be able to be a part of it.
Jason, how do you feel about working on this sort of with your background in design?
It's hard to put into words. It was, it's just it was an incredible journey and ride, and just being able to lend my talents to such a diverse and positive group of people that are all trying to survive was just, it's been the honor of my life, honestly. It's been the honor of my life to be able to do it. And I remember getting the phone call on, I think it was a Saturday night, Easter Saturday night, and hopped on a phone with Moose and Gary Witt, our CEO, and, hey, we need a logo. And I was like, okay, what are we making a logo for? And I was NIVA. I'm like, what is NIVA? And from there, I was hit the ground running. And ever since, it's just like, just seeing everybody come together. I think Audrey and Moose have both said this. It's just like, it's pretty incredible to see. And all these independent groups across the country come together and fight for a common cause and just come out on top. It's been pretty incredible. As you can see, it's amazing. It's been an amazing journey. So
yeah. Lenora, something you said struck me, that people were dealing with so much in 2020, but I feel like one of the interesting things about, the last year is how much we've come to realize how central live shows are to our lives, and that it's not a nice to have, it's not an add-on, it's pretty central. Was that something that energized you guys the whole way throughout this?
Absolutely, because, when we started this, it's like we have to recognize that this was an idea. It wasn't a mission that had been happening for years. Most people have been lobbying Congress for years. Most people have had their mission in the public for years, their logo, their brand, their design. We literally were starting from nothing, and like literally nothing. And to us, it was extremely important because we work in entertainment. It's our livelihood, right? I mean, we can't pay the bills, like we're closing. Venues are closing, trying to stay alive, trying to pay bills, trying to keep people employed. But on top of that, in order to take the idea from 0 to 100 and to get all of the support that Audrey and Moose and Dana and Jason, we get everyone to come together, donate their time, and get the support of the general public was a challenge because the general public was also losing their jobs, also had industries that were challenged, and then trying to be in front of Congress for something that they had never even given a second thought to was incredibly difficult. But I think what the people showed was that not only for us working in the industry, but for them to receive and have normalcy in their own personal lives, for them to have the inspiration of a song or a play or to laugh at a comedian was essential to them to have that normalcy in their lives. And I think what everyone said was, obviously still more important to have, a home, food, health, safety. But this was essential to the spirit of the people in the United States. And I think that is what was encouraging to us and inspiring to us to continue to push forward. And we didn't know if we were going to get support. I mean, the first phone call when we were together saying, okay, how are we going to get bipartisan support? I've done that before. But knowing that people signed on to say, hey, we support you. So we said, okay, well, we believe in it. People are supporting us. They feel this is inspiring to them and important to them. We got to get this across the finish line. We got to figure out how to do it. So it was really, because there was no road. I mean, there was no path, no road, no, like, this is definitely going to happen. You just have to follow X, Y, and Z. It truly was grassroots, ground level, marketing and footwork that got it across the finish line. And if people didn't support us and hadn't said, hey, we support you, this is important to us, then I think that it may not have come to fruition. So I really do think people supporting us was extremely, extremely important in getting the effort across the finish line.
Yeah. Okay. Moose and Audrey, I'm wondering about, once legislation became the North Star for NIVA, what that process was like. I mean, that's intimidating for anyone to try to engage Congress on any level. So can you talk a little bit about engaging Senator Schumer and others and how you got the relationship through there and what the challenges were?
Well, sure. I'm glad to talk about that. And the weekend that Jason was referring to, that Easter weekend, we were on calls interviewing lobbying firms in DC. And the first thing we did was to, after a bunch of interviews, select a company, Aiken Gump, that is, they fought for us as though they were us, and we could not be here without them as well. And as Lenora said, none of us had ever lobbied the federal government. So we needed Aiken Gump to help us learn how to do that. How do you get funding when everybody else is looking for funding in this once in 100-year pandemic? And also, Capitol Hill was closed. You were not allowed to move about Washington, D.C. So we needed an organization that had the contacts already in their phone, and not somebody who was trying to establish it. And so what we did is as we were adding members, carved up the country into precincts, and Aiken Gump came on and we had precinct captains or their volunteer members, and they taught us, okay, you're going to need to call your senator and your representative, and this is how you do it. This is how you say it. And you're also going to need to get all the other members in your area to be a part of it, so they understand that their constituents really care about this. And as Lenora was saying, we needed also, because we didn't exist, why would a legislator pick up a phone or have their staff even talk to us, because everybody else is looking for help? I'm not sure which genius in one of these squares did it, but started the website saveourstages.com after, and that was a way for the general public to be able to, one, learn about our issue, and two, have their voices heard. And we were able to get 2.1 million emails sent to Congress through that website, and which was phenomenal. And everybody in lobbying say that's just completely unheard of, but it told members of Congress, oh, this is important to my constituents. I'm going to listen. And in the end, we had 230 co-sponsors to this legislation, and it was bipartisan in both houses. So, and the other thing that we had, although, we hadn't existed before, we had no name recognition in the beginning, but we were able to take inventory of a couple of things that we did have, and that is all the members' customer mailing lists. We asked all the members to get information out to their customers, because that's who's going to care if we can reopen, and when it was safe to do so. And the other constituency that would care if we could reopen are the artists. And we also know that they have a big voice on Capitol Hill and also with their fans. So another set of programs were developed in marketing programs to get the artists to sign on. And we had more than 1,000 artists. Patrick Wilson was the head of that committee, but with all the tools that marketing had provided, artists were able to sign letters to Congress and also post information on their socials to engage more grassroots to support. And with that combination, we were able to capture the imagination of Capitol Hill. But it was also about how we can be part of the economic renewal for our communities when it's safe to reopen. And now that's what we're close to.
Yeah. Moose, do you feel like you brought some of your experience, in music marketing, music industry, to bear on this project, and how similar were the skills involved and how different?
Well, in addition to the advocacy and learning how to advocate, I think the one thing that none of us really want to acknowledge is how difficult this campaign was compared to anything else that we've ever done. And not just because of the speed at which it had to run and the hours that it took. And I don't think it's an overstatement to say that, especially in those first 6, 7, 8 months, most of us were working in an unhealthy amount of hours. And that's usually the accepted norm in this industry. So when I'm telling you it's an unhealthy amount of hours, I mean, truly, it was a consuming effort, nights, weekends, 7 days a week for months on end without a single break. But really, I think from like compared to traditional marketing efforts, it was very frustrating that we would put plans in place and they would change instantly. And I know everyone on this call can understand that, because communications and marketing is all about the planning. This is the end goal. This is what we're working towards. And we didn't have that luxury. We would put plans in place, and before the day ended, they were gone. Like they were just completely scrapped. Full designs. I mean, bless Jason and Lenora and Audrey, because, like putting together designs and websites and marketing plans and press releases, and then being told we don't need it was a daily occurrence. But we had to move so quickly, because when we did need it, it needed to happen instantly. And this was not just for the squares on the screen. It was every single one of our members that were reacting in the same way. We would send out a notice on one day that says, call these people, say this thing. And 4 hours later, we'd say, call those people, say that thing. And that was just how fast we had to move. It was the different pieces of legislation that we were pursuing. It was the senators and the representatives that we were calling. It was the artists that were reaching out and working on behalf. It was the fundraisers that we were doing. All of these different elements. It moved so quickly, and it consumed everybody. The fortuitous side of nobody having any other work to do is that those efforts and that energy and the time was able to be spent on this one project that was so important. And of course, the downside of that, it meant that we had a lot of volunteers that were out of work. And so people were when they could have otherwise been spending times with their families and pursuing new potential career avenues, they were spending that time helping NIVA and the members within NIVA to be able to more likely reopen. And that, we had several hundred venues and promoters had closed for good through this process, and it happened, I would say, pretty quickly in the beginning side of things. And then as NIVA took shape, as the legislation took shape, you saw those slow down. And I'd like to think that NIVA had a direct hand in saving as many of those venues as we possibly could, because it felt like help was on the way. Help is on the way. Help is here. And it just didn't exist before. So part of what we were doing wasn't just telling the elected officials, this is what we need. It was also telling other members of our own community, hey, we're working together and this is what we're working towards. And those messages got to landlords, they got to banks, they got to employees, like everybody was able to hear this and hold out that we'd be able to reopen and hopefully soon.
Another challenge that I think shouldn't be forgotten this year that occurred last year was Audrey, God bless you, because it was an election year and there were, a pandemic, race issues, and an election year that had the largest turnout ever. So clearly tons of messaging from both parties. And then somehow Audrey being able to get us press and headlines and, get people in the community and in the press interested in actually discussing and covering what it is we were fighting for. I mean, God bless you, because I am telling you, I know from a marketing and advertising perspective how hard it is to get your name out there during an election year. And somehow Audrey was able to navigate it all, which is why a lot of the messages had to be moved, because this politician said this, so now we got to move it back a day, and that politician said that, so we need to move this here. And thank you to all the politicians that supported, because they were going through a lot of controversial things on their end too. So to get bipartisan support is truly unheard of. But Audrey, wow,
yeah, that's amazing.
Well, thank you. And the other thing I would add is that two things I was reminded of too. Every time we had a conversation with a legislator, in addition to explaining our business, which we had never done before because we've never had to. These are small businesses and business people that have always been able to figure it out, recalibrate, no matter what the financial situation was or whatever crisis had come up. But this is obviously a situation when you have zero revenue and you have all the overhead that there was just no way to rejigger that. But while we were communicating, I was always, and I think we're always very mindful, is we were fighting for the survival of our industry because there would be a mass collapse, but we also had to be incredibly sensitive to other things. People were losing their family members and their friends. And we never wanted to do anything other than to be sensitive toward that. Most everybody had to furlough 98% of their employees, which is devastating. These are our families, but we weren't allowed to have them in our places of business. So when we were advocating for the Save Our Stages Act, we were also always hand in hand talking about, can you please extend the unemployment insurance and also the pandemic unemployment assistance package on top of that, because our people don't have any place to work. They would love to, but it's not like you could just lift up and go to another town to do this, because nowhere could you. And they couldn't get other jobs as bartenders in a different place because nowhere could you. So that was something we were also worried about too. And then the aspects of our country turned upside down with grief and horror when we watched the murder of George Floyd. And there's no business or no mission that could possibly not figure out what that means for all of us and what can we do about that. And that we had to set aside what our other mission was and understand what can we do to help our communities. And for instance, just every venue did something different, I'm sure. I'm in DC, the 930 Club, so we had protests. That's where so many of the protests were happening. Of course, it happened in all sorts of cities, but we were able to open up our venue for a safe place for protesters to come, because they were also at risk. So they could come use a restroom facility because everything was shuttered. It was the height of the pandemic, and people could wash their hands. They could get something to eat, recharge their batteries. So we as venues and as an industry, we're trying to figure out, okay, what else can we do at this time with that, on top of all the other missions that we had that we're trying to get through as an industry.
Yeah. Well, and also in the midst of all this, you guys managed to put on the Save Our Stages Fest event in October, which I'd love to touch on as well. So in addition to the Clio Music Impact Award, I'm happy to say NIVA has also won 2 more Clios and was shortlisted for a third for the Save Our Stages Fest, produced in conjunction with YouTube. You guys raised nearly $2 million, I believe, for venues, which is amazing. I'd love to hear some personal highlights from that event. First of all, I guess, Jason, was it a relief to be promoting an event instead of dealing with Congress and all that?
It was a great experience. I mean, the YouTube folks are just, I can't say I've ever worked with YouTube personally before, and their team is just fantastic. I have nothing but nice things to say about what they were able to do and how they were able to turn it around. And I mean, really, an incredible, easy amount of time. Short window. I just can't believe putting on something at that scale and that quickly it's unheard of. I mean, it's a festival. Yeah, it's a virtual festival, but it's a festival still. You had to line up all the clubs and, get the talent. It was just, I don't know. It's head spinning is what it really is. It's head spinning. And it was pretty incredible. We were able to pull it off with YouTube's help. So, and all the artists involved.
Yeah, Moose, what's your recollection of that time preparing for that?
Oh, it happened so quickly. I mean, I definitely remember there were a number of conversations where people were saying, it feels good to be back at work again, right? And the work was for each other. YouTube Music had just shown up early, and they were one of the loudest supporters that we could possibly have. We ended up having the SOS Fest on the homepage of Google, it was right there. That's unheard of. And, Steven Sternshine, who's one of NIVA's founding board members, executive produced the entire festival. We worked with every single partner we had to pull out every contact or phone number we could potentially reach out to. And it's, the artists all jumped in. It was an easy sell, if you will. The COVID protocols were incredibly strict. So everything was performed in completely shuttered venues that had otherwise not opened up. And I think just even talking to the operators and the owners of those places that had unlocked their doors for the first time in months to be able to welcome in Roots or Miley or the Foo Fighters or whomever, it was just, these were artists that had grown up in these spaces. And so for them to take the time out of their schedules, even if they're not actively busy touring, they still had a lot to do, and they still didn't need to do it for us, for our community, and they chose to. And we saw that time and time again. We've seen that with people picking up the phone and calling their senators or their representatives and saying, this is important to me personally. And we've seen that with people doing press conferences and showing up when they were asked to be able to show up. We've seen it with people doing interviews and op-eds. We've seen it with social media, and the type of community that they reach is just unprecedented. For as much as we're all very proud of the mailing list that we have and the social media reach that we have, it's the artists' world. And we're just a component in the artists' development and their careers and their relationship with their fans. But I think what we saw through this is the independent sector is so important to the development and the growth of not just the artists, but the communities within it, that was where that support came from. Was even if it hadn't been discussed in the past, it had to be discussed now. And all of this support was an acknowledgement of what wasn't necessarily at the front of people's minds in the past. And I hope that in the future, as people, look at their own neighborhood businesses and where they're going to spend their hard-earned dollars, as we all hopefully get back to work, I hope they will continue to keep this in the front of their mind as they make their decisions and understand the differences within the businesses that operate in their communities.
Gotcha. A couple more things I want to touch on before we go. First thing is, again, we're heading into the summer of 2021 now. People have to feel safe to going to concerts. Is NIVA involved in sort of messaging around vaccinations and that effort? And how are you guys helping, if you are NIVA members, sort of navigate that whole situation?
Yeah, really good question. The thing that we understand, like so many others do, is that we are a post-vaccine industry, meaning that we really, really, really are hoping that everybody possibly who can, to get a vaccine. And so we've provided messages for members to be able to send to their customer base. I know that most have, if you have a marquee, you have probably messaged about getting vaccines. And it's the type of thing that now, before people couldn't get the vaccine because there weren't enough of them. Now that they have, thankfully, I mean, my goodness, how lucky we are that there are 3 vaccines that most everybody has access to. But there's still components of our community that either are reluctant or don't know where and how to get it if they don't have internet or cell phones to get them the information. And so I know, like, for example, in DC, we got a group of volunteers from the 930 Club to knock on doors in the wards that the mayor had asked for us to get the word out, and dropping off flyers and encouraging people and telling them where they can get their vaccines, where it's something that, and how to get transportation to get there if that's an issue. I think that we all feel like we're part of the voice to be able to get people back in an environment where they feel comfortable and safe and are comfortable and safe. So.
Okay. Really, the last question for you guys that I have is, we're not out of the woods on this yet. And so I'm wondering, the Clio community speaks to a lot of brands and ad agencies. Can brands and agencies help you guys in any way right now over the next few months as we continue to navigate this?
Yeah, it would be great to have the extended help. We've been really fortunate from the very beginning to have corporate help, commercial partners, C-Tickets, E-Tix, Light, all endemic companies that had stepped forward in our first week and just wrote checks. And, I don't want to necessarily sound too crass about it, but we would not have been able to make those early commitments that we did without that support. We certainly got a fair amount of donations directly to NIVA, which was helpful. But we also directed the majority of the donations that we got to the NIVA Emergency Relief Fund, which directly went to help independent venues and promoters who needed financial assistance while we were continuing to fight for the federal legislation that would ultimately, be writing more tangible checks and help people in a more substantial way. The companies that have been part of this are just too numerous to even mention, but they were the ones that have been able to make us help and push this forward in a way, not just for the members, but for the communities too. In a world post-pandemic, as we start thinking about what the future is going to look like as businesses open up, as events start to happen, as tickets go on sale, that's really where I think there's a lot of opportunities for brands to be more directly engaged with the independent venue and promoter community than what we've been able to do in the past. And we are, you know, an organization, and we do have a lot of different future plans that directly involve those types of tie-ins that weren't possible until this point. So we have, you know, every single state, many of the territories represented, and we are here for good. NIVA is going to be sticking around, and we would welcome working with people in creative and entrepreneurial ways that have mutual benefits to it.
Amazing. Well, I'm in awe of you guys. I hope brands and agencies are listening to that because, you know, thanks to your efforts, you know, there will be many more venues left standing where we can enjoy live shows after this is over. So thank you for all your work, and congrats again on your Clio Awards. So well deserved. And thanks for chatting today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to my panelists, and check out all the Clio Music winners today at clios.com. And thank you all for watching.